The blood had already soaked through his jacket when he stumbled into the ER, eyes wide with something between pain and disbelief. For a second, the nurses froze, unsure whether to call security or the crash cart. But Ava Jennings didn't hesitate. She was already halfway across the floor, gloves snapped on, voice firm. "Get me gauze, now." The man, black, mid-40s, soaked in red, collapsed against the triage counter. She didn't know his name. No one did. And the protocol said he had to wait. But Ava's instinct screamed louder than any rule. This man is dying. And if she didn't break the rules, no one else would. Friday nights in the ER of Pinebrook Medical weren't for the faint of heart. The lighting buzzed fluorescent and unforgiving. Coffee breath mixed with antiseptic, and the air was thick with pain. The kind that spoke in whispers, moans, or silence. Ava Jennings, 33, moved through that chaos like she was born in it. Her skin gleamed deep brown beneath the pale blue scrubs, her hair coiled into a tight bun. No nonsense, no distractions. She'd been a trauma nurse for almost a decade, but her voice still carried the fire of someone who hadn't given up on people. Behind her badge was someone raised in Detroit public housing by a mother who worked 3 shifts and still found time to read the Bible out loud. Ava had seen systems fail people like her. She'd seen neighbors bleed on sidewalks while ambulances debated zip codes. That's why she never waited for permission to save a life. But lately, that belief was on a collision course with hospital policy. Ever since the new board took over, rules had turned rigid. Every patient now had to register, verify ID, confirm insurance, even in trauma cases. No treatment without paperwork, they said. And the worst part? They meant it. Ava had already been written up twice, both times for treating people who wouldn't have made it past the front desk. One more violation and she was out, fired, discredited. But how do you unlearn urgency? He stumbled in at 11:46 p.m. Blood seeping through a torn hoodie, limping, eyes unfocused. He looked around, dazed, then muttered, "Please." I didn't want to die in the street. And that was it. Ava was already moving. Janet Rutherford, the shift supervisor, blocked her path. Late 50s, pale, iron-gray bob, clipboard always in hand. "Not yet," she said, tone sharp. "He hasn't signed in." "He's bleeding out," Ava replied, tightening her jaw. "He's not even in the system," Janet hissed. "You help him before intake and you're done here." But Ava wasn't listening anymore. Her hand was on his arm, guiding him to Bay 3. His legs buckled halfway, and she caught him. Felt how light he was, how cold. No paperwork mattered more than this man's life. "What's your name?" she asked, breath tight. "Marcus," he said weakly. "Marcus Lang." She pressed gauze to the wound, felt the heat of blood, the pulse fading. "I need a trauma team now," she barked. "BP dropping fast." The white tile under Marcus turned red. Behind her, Janet's voice rang cold. "Ava, step away!" But Ava didn't. Couldn't. She just said, "Then fire me." And the monitor beside her began to flatline. Marcus Lang was unconscious before the trauma team arrived. The monitor screamed with dipping vitals, but Ava stayed locked in. Pressure on the artery, voice steady, sweat dripping down her temples. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, not until Dr. Howard burst in with the crash cart. "What happened?" he asked, already snapping on gloves. "Arterial bleed, upper bicep, BP unstable, pulse thready." "You bypassed registration again?" he muttered, not looking up. Ava didn't answer. She was too busy keeping him alive. Beside her, a younger nurse named Kaylee watched in silence. Blonde, new, scared, but she passed Ava the clamps like muscle memory. The whole room shifted into motion, even while Janet stood outside Bay 3, scribbling furiously into her violation report like she was writing history. They worked fast. Within minutes, the bleeding was controlled, and Marcus was wheeled to surgery. Only then did Ava step back, hands trembling, her heart finally catching up to the moment. She leaned against the wall, her scrubs soaked in blood that wasn't hers. The waiting room buzzed like nothing had happened. Phones rang. Children cried, insurance cards exchanged hands, but Ava knew what was coming. Janet's voice followed her down the corridor like a knife. You were warned 3 times. And he would have died 3 times if I hadn't, Ava shot back. Janet crossed her arms. You think the rules don't apply to you? No, Ava replied. I think they don't apply to bleeding black men. That silenced Janet for half a beat. Then she said, We'll see what HR has to say. By midnight, Ava sat alone in the glass office on the 3rd floor, still in bloody scrubs, still refusing to feel regret. Across from her was Miles Brennan, pale, polished, legal consultant for the hospital. Behind him stood Dr. Elaine Mercer, board rep, face tight with discomfort. Ms. Jennings, Miles began. You understand this is your 3rd violation? And he's alive, she said flatly. That's not the point, Elaine interjected. The system doesn't work if people just go rogue. Ava stared at them. If the system works, why was I the only one who moved? Silence. They were angry. Not because she'd broken the rule, but because her defiance had worked. She'd saved someone, and that made their policies look like death sentences. And no administrator likes to be called a killer. 2 floors down, Marcus Lang was out of surgery. Alive, stable, and none of them had even asked. Ava left the meeting without signing anything. No apologies, no reassurances, just quiet rage walking past cold walls. Kaylee stopped her by the elevator. Was he really dying? Ava nodded. Would have bled out on the floor. Then you did the right thing, Kaylee whispered. But Ava knew what happened to nurses who did the right thing. They were made examples of, silenced, erased. And yet something told her this time might be different. Because the next morning, the lobby wasn't empty anymore. It was filled. They came in pairs. Then in clusters. Then all at once. Dozens of men and women in full marine dress blues stood shoulder to shoulder in the lobby of Pinebrook Medical. Their boots echoed across the linoleum floor like war drums, their ribbons gleaming under hospital fluorescents. Not a single one spoke. It wasn't a protest. It was a statement. And they weren't here for treatment. They were here for her. Ava stepped off the elevator and stopped dead. She thought it was a mistake. Maybe a ceremony, a memorial, a coincidence. But then she saw the woman at the center of it all. Tall, blonde, commanding presence in a pressed uniform. Are you Ava Jennings? She asked, her voice cutting clean through the silence. Yes, Ava replied cautiously. The woman extended her hand. I'm Captain Rachel Lang. Marcus Lang is my father. Everything slowed. I flew in the second I heard, Rachel continued. He told me what you did, told me you didn't hesitate, that you broke the rules to save a man nobody else saw. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from restrained fury. I've seen men die in combat. I never thought my father would have to fight for his life in a hospital lobby. Hospital security stood at the edges, stunned and frozen. The front desk clerk had stopped typing. Even Janet, who now lingered behind the coffee cart, had lost the grip on her clipboard. You saved his life, Rachel said. And they're trying to punish you? Ava could only nod, her throat dry. Rachel turned to the sea of uniforms behind her. Marines take care of their own, and we take care of those who take care of us. One by one, the Marines saluted. No words, just the sound of 30 arms rising in perfect unison. The air in the room shifted, from sterile to sacred. Ava had faced judgment before. In school, when teachers assumed she'd cheat. In grocery stores, where eyes followed her every move. In hospitals, where patients asked for someone else. But never like this. This wasn't suspicion. This was reverence. It didn't make her proud. It made her ache. Because Marcus had almost died. And it took a daughter in a uniform for anyone to care. Later that afternoon, the media arrived. A whisper turned into a headline. Nurse breaks protocol to save black veteran. Hospital threatens termination. Cameras flooded the lobby. News anchors rehearsed sound bites. But Ava stayed quiet. She wasn't here for interviews. She wasn't chasing credit. She was just trying to breathe. Back upstairs, Marcus Lang had woken up. His first question wasn't about his surgery or the pain meds. It was, "Is she okay?" The nurse at his bedside blinked. "Who?" He smiled weakly. "The one who saw me." By nightfall, Ava's name was trending. Her inbox flooded. Some messages called her a hero. Others called her reckless. But buried beneath the noise was one quiet voicemail. "I remember you," the voice said. "You helped my wife 3 years ago, even when she didn't have ID. I never forgot that. This time, we won't let them erase you." She played it twice. Then she sat on the floor of the break room, surrounded by nurses whispering what they never dared say out loud. She did what we've all wanted to do. She said no to the rules. She said yes to the patient. And just when Ava thought the noise couldn't get louder, her phone buzzed again. Congressman Logan Wright was outside, and he wasn't alone. The moment Congressman Logan Wright stepped into the hospital lobby, every camera pivoted like a command. He was clean-cut, crisp navy suit, silver star pinned discreetly on his lapel. A white politician who'd served 2 tours before Congress ever knew his name. And yet, when he looked at Ava, his voice cracked. "My brother didn't make it home from Iraq. He bled out, waiting." That was all he said before walking to her, shaking her hand like it meant something. And for once, it did. Behind him, more people gathered. Veterans, nurses, reporters, mothers. They weren't shouting. They were watching, waiting. This wasn't just a protest. It had become a reckoning. Dr. Mercer tried to steer the congressman into a conference room, desperate to contain the optics. "We can discuss hospital matters privately." "No," Wright said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "What happens to this nurse is a matter of public trust." He turned back to the crowd. "This woman saved an American veteran when your system wouldn't. If that's a fireable offense, then maybe the system needs to be fired." The walls cracked under the weight of applause. Upstairs, Ava sat quietly with Marcus, whose voice was still rough from anesthesia. "They tell me I made it," he said, watching her. "But from what I hear, you might not." Ava managed a tired smile. "You're alive. That's the only part I care about." Marcus shook his head. "You cared before you knew who I was. That's the part they can't ignore." He shifted in bed, wincing. "You know how many times I walked into rooms and got ignored? Same uniform, same medals, different skin." Ava swallowed hard. "Don't let them say it wasn't about that," Marcus said quietly. "Don't let them make this clean." Downstairs, the hospital board gathered in haste. Closed doors, red faces. Dr. Mercer read off talking points while Administrator Philip Crane, white-haired, ice-cold, paced in silence. "We'll frame this as a miscommunication," Mercer offered. "We say the nurse acted emotionally, not maliciously." "She acted morally," said a voice from the corner. It was Kaylee, the young nurse. Everyone turned. "She did what we're supposed to do. What the oath says." Crane narrowed his eyes. "You're out of line." Kaylee didn't flinch. "Number you are." And that was the moment the dam cracked. By early evening, a new banner hung outside the hospital. "Patient care before policy." It wasn't official. It was spray paint. Fast, ugly, defiant. No one claimed it. But no one took it down either. Inside, Ava prepared herself. She knew what was coming. HR would try to offer her a deal. The media would spin both sides. Her name would be attached to sound bites she never chose. But she also knew something else. People were listening. And they weren't just listening to her. They were listening to every nurse who'd ever been forced to choose between paperwork and humanity. Every patient who'd watched the clock while their body failed. Every black man who walked into a white institution and prayed to be seen as human. At 9:03 p.m., the board made their move. Administrator Crane walked into the ER flanked by 2 security guards. Clipboard in hand, mouth tight. He asked for Ava by name. But this time, the nurses stood first. One by one, like dominoes. Not loud, not violent, just present. I'm Ava Jennings, one nurse said. No, I am, said another. The entire shift stood in her name. And for the first time in his life, Crane looked like a man who didn't know what to do next. The lobby was silent. No monitors, no overhead pages, no shoes squeaking across tile. Just a wall of nurses standing shoulder to shoulder in pale blue scrubs, defying the man who came to erase one of their own. Crane stood frozen. The clipboard in his hand suddenly felt small. Security, he said, voice cracking with authority. I want Nurse Ava Jennings removed from this building. She's already gone, one nurse said calmly. She's in all of us now, said another. From behind the line, Ava stepped forward, blood-stained scrubs, chin high, eyes calm. I'll go, she said softly, but not quietly. Outside, floodlights from media vans cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Protesters held handmade signs. Some said, "Patience before paperwork." Others read, "See us." One sign, painted in red and black, simply said, "She saw him." Captain Rachel Lang stood beside them, uniform pressed, holding a folded photo of her father in combat gear. It shook in her hand, but she wasn't crying. She was waiting. Administrator Crane finally broke. Ms. Jennings, you're terminated effective immediately. The words rang out like a gunshot. Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed, but Ava didn't move. You just fired a nurse, Congressman Wright said, stepping forward. For saving a man your system left to die. This is about protocol, Crane stammered. No, Ava cut in. This is about race. And the entire room stopped breathing. I've treated dozens of patients who bled like Marcus did, she said, but none of them had to beg to be seen. None of them were asked for ID while their blood hit the floor. The only difference this time was melanin. She stepped closer, voice lower. And you didn't care until he wore a uniform. Reporters scribbled, cameras rolled. But it was the faces, nurses, janitors, EMTs, that told the story. White, brown, black. All of them listening like it was their truth too. Dr. Mercer, now ghost pale, whispered, "We need to rethink." "You needed to care," Ava replied. And then the doors opened. Marcus Lang, barely upright, still in a hospital gown, stitches tugging with each step, walked into the lobby on his own. Silence fell again. He looked directly at Crane. "I don't want compensation," Marcus said. "I don't want apology. I want this woman's name on that wall, because the only reason I'm standing here is her." He turned to Ava. "You saw me, when no one else did." And then, to every nurse watching, "See us, all of us." The next morning, half the ER staff called out in protest. Several departments followed. Appointments were canceled, donations froze, media trucks camped outside. The hospital's name was now a national headline, its reputation bleeding faster than any wound Ava had ever treated. Still, Ava walked home alone that night. No crowd, no badge. Just her breath in the cold and the whisper of doubt crawling into her chest. Had it been worth it? She stepped into her apartment, turned off her phone, and sank into the couch, when a knock came. She opened the door to a letter. No return address. Just a single page inside. You were right not to wait. Underneath was a check. Small, anonymous. And a note in shaky handwriting. My son made it because of nurses like you. Ava sat in the hallway for a long time. And outside, the headlines kept climbing. 3 days later, Pinebrook Medical's board held an emergency meeting. Not to debate Ava's actions, but to salvage what was left of their name. Donors were pulling funding. Military families were withdrawing their loved ones. Nurses were threatening mass resignations. Congressman Wright had announced plans to launch an ethics investigation into the hospital's practices. But none of that moved the board as much as what they saw through the conference room window. Across the street, a mural was being painted. Brushstroke by brushstroke, it formed the image of Ava Jennings, hands outstretched, covered in blood, lifting Marcus Lang from the ground. The caption beneath it read, "She didn't wait." Ava stood across from it in silence, Jacket zipped to her chin, eyes steady. Beside her was Kaylee, holding a coffee neither of them had touched. "You're not going back, are you?" Kaylee asked. Ava shook her head. "Not unless something changes." And then the news came. Dr. Mercer, not Crane, was the one who approached her. No podium, no cameras, just a folded document and shaking hands. "We've suspended the intake protocol indefinitely," she said. "We're building a new system, one that starts with care, not compliance." Ava didn't speak. Mercer continued. "We'd like you to come back. Not as staff, as leadership." A pause. "You'd have power, Ava. You'd rewrite what failed you." Weeks passed. The new system had a name now. The Jennings Protocol. Immediate care first, paperwork second. Training was required hospital-wide. Nurses felt safer. Patients felt seen. The waiting room no longer decided who lived. But for Ava, it wasn't about policies. It was about people. She watched as Marcus walked back into the ER, on his own 2 feet, not as a patient, but as a speaker. He stood before a room of nursing students and told the story of a night when dignity had to be fought for. He ended with this: "Her job wasn't to decide if I was worthy. It was to act like I already was." The final headline wasn't flashy. Just a quiet article buried 3 pages deep. "Nurse reinstated after heroic action sparks national reform." But that didn't matter. What mattered was what came after. Ava's story began to appear in textbooks, in nursing programs, in training modules across the country. It wasn't about fame. It was about making sure the next black man who walked in bleeding didn't need a miracle to be treated like a human being. And 5 months later, Ava walked into that same trauma bay, now renamed in bold silver letters. The Marcus Lang Critical Response Wing. She stood there alone for a while, breathing it in, remembering the blood, the weight, the silence. And then, slowly, she smiled. People still asked her if it had been worth it. The job loss, the fear, the spotlight. And she always answered the same way. "I didn't save him because I thought I could win. I saved him because nobody else moved." Sometimes justice doesn't come loud. Sometimes it walks in quietly, bleeding, unheard, and prays that someone like Ava is on duty.